Hello, Empowered Warriors. Welcome to episode 13, lucky number 13. Like so many numbers, I love this number, so I feel very grateful to be at episode 13. We are now over 2 months, just over the 2-month mark of podcasting. And I am just so grateful to all of you who have been supporting and listening and downloading and leaving reviews. And my mom, every time I talk to her, she tells me that so-and-so's listening and so-and-so's listening. So if you're out there and you know my mom and you've been telling her how you've been listening, I just want to express my utmost gratitude to you for listening to the podcast, for all of your support. I really hope that you find this podcast valuable. And if you do, I want to humbly ask you, only if it resonates, to leave this podcast a review on iTunes. And the reason why, you may or may not know why so many podcasters ask for online reviews on iTunes. And really the reason is it comes down to numbers. There are literally hundreds of thousands of podcasts. At least that was the number that I got when I started my podcast, because I wanted to know how many podcasts existed. So it's hundreds of thousands of podcasts are out there in the interwebs. And one way that we can stand out is by getting a fair amount of 4- and 5-star reviews on iTunes. So if you feel compelled, if this resonates for you, if you have received some kind of value by listening to the Empowered Warrior, I would be ever so grateful if you could just so kindly leave a review on iTunes. And if you do that, I will give you an Amazon gift card. So if you just go to the show notes after you leave your review, actually before you leave your review, I will leave the instructions in the show notes for this episode, and it will tell you everything you need to do to review the podcast on iTunes and what you need to do to let me know that you've done that. I will get that gift card out to you as soon as possible. You may or may not notice that I might sound a little scratchy, and that is because I am recording this late into the night because I have decided that starting on August 1st, that I am really going in with all 10 toes to be 100% committed to the business. So that means showing up when I say I'm going to show up. And when something is due, I'm going to hand it in on time. So technically, my podcast is due to my editor on Sunday night. So I'm really committed to that because I think, just like anything in life, it's really important to be in integrity, not only with other people, but with yourself. And it just makes, I have to say, everything go so much more smoothly to be in integrity, right? It's easier to make decisions. Sometimes it might be uncomfortable, right? Like right now, what I really want to do is be, curled up in bed with my husband, but I'm committed to getting this podcast out for you guys and out to my editor. So I'm telling you this not only just to share this information with you and to be in integrity, to be committed and to follow through, but also I hope that it inspires you, because I have many business owners who follow me. And I know that many of you struggle with getting everything done, with doing all the things. And I just want to impart this little bit of wisdom to you, is that when you set that intention and you use your will and you get that stuff done, you're not ever having to question yourself. You're not ever having to go through that cycle of procrastination or writer's block, or in my case, podcaster's block, because there's this agreement that already exists. The podcast gets done. So I told my husband, I'm working this weekend. I need to get my podcast done, and I'm going to be staying up late to finish it. And that's just how it is, because that's the agreement. That is what 100% committed looks like. So one of my mentors, I just want to share this before I continue. And one of my mentors says that, part of being successful most of the time does not look attractive. It doesn't look pretty. It's not always exciting, right? And I totally get that. And I'm just thinking about that as I'm, it's almost 11 o'clock at night and I'm up recording my podcast. So I just wanted to share that with you all. So if my voice cracks, if I sound like I'm sleepy, it's because it's past my bedtime. So anyway, warriors, welcome to episode 13. This episode feels very alive and important to broadcast. And I have to admit that I felt like I was kind of stumbling through it at times in the preparation. In this episode, I talk about why it's important to have teachers, mentors, and coaches to help guide you, but why it's even more important to be your own guru. So, stay tuned. Welcome to the Empowered Warrior Podcast. My name is Angela Noel, and I am an intuitive coach, acupuncturist, and Chinese herbalist. This podcast is all about empowerment, meaning how you can maintain your personal power in order to have the best life beyond your imagination. An empowered warrior is someone who has the identity of a person who is healthy, radiant, and free from all suffering, and has the tools ready and available to move through life's obstacles with confidence, ease, and a sense of freedom. In this podcast, I bring over 16 years experience in Chinese medicine, countless years of self-development, and a passion for helping others find their personal power. I will be discussing just a few of my favorite topics regarding health from a Chinese medicine perspective, brain habits, and spirituality, so that you can quickly pave your pathway to freedom and be free from the chains that have kept you stuck. My intention with this podcast is to serve as a guide for warriors who want to form a healthy foundation of body, mind, and spirit, and sustain it by changing who they are being from the inside and having a stronger connection to their higher selves. My goal is to help students end the unnecessary suffering that they place on themselves by having poor health habits, negative thought loops, and a lack of self-worth. I am so happy that you're here. Hello, Empowered Warriors. Welcome to another episode. Podcasting is very interesting. I feel like I am never out of content or struggling to find a topic to talk about. And I realize I am relatively new to podcasting still, and I know that many podcasters like to batch their podcasts by preparing and getting many podcasts out at the same time. I, however, have not come up with my system yet, and I am still working on one podcast at a time every week. And actually, I think there are benefits to both. I consider myself to be a creative and a visionary, and this system actually allows me to be more in flow with what's coming through me at that time. So by the time the podcast is released, the content feels like more of an energetic match for that time frame, rather than batching them and have them come out long after the inspiration was happening. Does that make sense? I don't even know if I'm making sense, but perhaps I should just say that it feels more authentic and like I can bring you the most relevant content when I work week to week. Why do I mention this? Because I know there are many entrepreneurs who follow me and enjoy the little tidbits of business gold that I insert in my podcasts, right? Am I right? Just let me know if that resonates for you and if you're enjoying these little tidbits, because it's something I've been throwing in lately that I feel just might be a little extra something for you. And by the way, this may or may not be a secret to you, but if you have a business and you're looking to expand your reach podcasting is where it's at, y'all. I'm just saying. Podcasting is, well, it's not completely free because I have an editor, but for the most part, it's a lot less expensive than running Facebook ads. So if you're looking to get into the international market, you want to get your voice out there, you want to get your business out there, I highly recommend podcasting. Okay, so have you been noticing at all that life lessons are coming through like crazy lately? I don't know, perhaps it's everything that's going on in the cosmos, or it's just how it always is, and I'm just more in tuned. I don't know, but holy lessons, warriors. Lessons have been coming through like crazy, like in my face lately. And when I say lessons, I'm talking about the hard stuff. You know what I mean? So if you've been listening to my podcast for a while, you will know that lessons happen not because life happens to us, but because life happens for us. Am I right? So what about you? Have you been noticing the lessons? I feel like for those of us in the world who are experiencing summer right now, and summer being the season of the heart, especially in summer of 2020 when I'm recording this, summer is often full of lessons anyway, but even more full of lessons this year. So as I mentioned in episode 8, where I spoke of the heart's significance from the standpoint of Chinese medicine, the heart represents joy in balance, or excess or lack of joy, depending on if the heart is in balance or not. And if you haven't listened to that episode yet and you want to know more about the heart in summertime, I invite you to go back and listen to episode 8. But I'm really noticing that heart energy has felt pretty strong this summer. Perhaps with everything going on in the world combined with all the intensity of different events happening in our galaxy. But man, oh man, the lessons lately, they're just feeling brutal. One of the lessons that keeps coming into my awareness, this particular time of year especially, is the lesson of trust. Trusting that everything is happening as it is meant to, and trusting that I have everything that I need. Trusting that everything always has, is, and will be okay. In my personal experience, trust is one of those lessons that keeps coming back for another appearance in my TV show called The Life of Angela Noel. I mean, seriously, have you ever noticed with the lessons? Oh my gosh, it's as if we as humans can never get enough of the same lesson. For me personally, it seems like once I feel that I am good with leaning into trust and that I've learned the lesson, that another layer shows up where I am forced to learn that lesson again. But this time, the lesson feels even heavier and harder. You may or may not have noticed this happening to you, and I'm curious. Can you relate to this? Can you relate to this especially right now? It just feels like the universe is like, okay, you haven't had enough lessons in this life. Let me just throw you some more. Now that you've healed from the last round of lessons, let me give you some more, right? Can you relate to this, guys? So one thing I've learned about lessons is that they always come when I need the lesson. What is that quote? When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. So I'm curious, warriors, how are you doing in the trust department? Are you someone who also receives the lessons to trust yourself more often? I am noticing that this is a pretty huge subject matter because the issue of trust is so ingrained in the concept of self-worth. And self-worth, as I have mentioned in almost all of my other episodes, is foundational to having the life that we want. In my interpretation, self-worth is like that long-lost relative that we never know about until we find out that she exists. And this knowing has the ability to permanently change our lives forever. So what I am really wanting to get at today is the concept of guruism in our society. Now, I don't claim to be an expert in guruism, but I am an expert in self-worth, and I have witnessed how dangerous it can be when we trust other people more than we trust ourselves. And then when it becomes really concerning is when we have that teacher or leader or coach or mentor that becomes so important to us that we start to rely on him or her to show us the way, and we forget that we are our own guru. Am I right? You may or may not know this, but I listen to many podcasts. I read a lot about self-development and have personally done a lot of work on myself for close to 30 years. I have had many teachers, mentors, coaches, and leaders that I myself have looked up to, whose work I attribute to my success both in my life and my business. I have been there when I have had that person in my life who I really respected and wanted to absorb as much of their wisdom as possible in order for me to be better, do better, and feel better. I have been in that place where I relied too heavily on what other people have taught me, or even the opinions of others, whether they were my teacher or not. And I experienced the repercussions of relying on outside sources and not on my own inner wisdom to make decisions, to decide what programs to run, and to direct my inner compass. The thing is, when we are not in alignment with ourselves, when we rely too heavily on other people, when we are trusting what other people are telling us instead of ourselves, that is when we make decisions or act out of alignment. And that is when we end up in places when we are not happy, or a launch flops, or something just never feels quite right. As an entrepreneur, it is understandable how this can happen, especially since as entrepreneurs, we often find ourselves in uncharted territory. Am I right? It's easy to talk to all the experts and make a decision that perhaps is not exactly the best one for you. I'll give you an example from my personal life. This is something that happened to me a few years ago. In 2018, I was in a group coaching program with my very first business coach. And in the program, we were to create and launch our very first group program. Now, mind you, I was brand new into coaching, and I honestly had no idea what I was doing, which was why I was in the program. So while in a session with a group, I was in the hot seat, and I was talking about how I wasn't sure what type of program to launch. What I really wanted was to launch something to help women form a strong foundation of health and wellness, and then from there have their newly found health be the launch pad into their self-empowerment. Basically, I wanted to help women transform and have more confidence so that they could have the life that they wanted. So while talking with my coach in the group, I was telling them about my idea for a program that I really wanted to do. My coach suggested that since I'm a Chinese medicine practitioner, that perhaps I should create a program that incorporates my area of expertise as well. Something I've done that I'm good at so that I can really showcase that I'm an expert. I mean, that makes sense, right? So I started talking about how when I had my Boston practice, that I worked primarily with women who wanted to conceive. You probably already know that fertility is pretty hot, and if you're an acupuncturist, there is always a high supply of patients who are looking for fertility treatments. And to go a little further back, when I was in acupuncture school, I was really interested in working with the spiritual and emotional aspect of patients. When I look back, what really lit me up were the lessons having to do with helping patients have a strong emotional, mental, and spiritual well-being. So fast forward, I have my practice in Copley Square, Boston, and I'm hungry. I was in a much different state of mind back in 2008 when I started. And when I say hungry, I'm not talking about my next meal. I'm talking about I was hungry for business. I was a new business owner, and I wanted my patients. And there was a lot of fear, and there was a lot of lack-mindedness. I had a lot of anxiety about getting and keeping patients. And basically, instead of niching down and really working on my positioning, I mean, I had absolutely no idea about any of that stuff. I accepted whatever patient came into the door. And the people who came to me were mainly fertility patients. And so at one point, my practice was very busy and about 85% fertility. And while it was rewarding and I learned so much about fertility and everything that comes with it, it was honestly not what I truly enjoyed doing. It paid the bills and I did well, but quite honestly, fertility didn't fill my cup. And in the 10 years that I had my practice in Boston, I worked primarily with fertility patients. It wasn't in my awareness that I could do something else or change the scope of my practice that was more in alignment. I just did it. I went through the motions. So back in 2018, when I was discussing my group program with the group coaching I was in, I brought up the idea of a group coaching program for women who want to conceive. And this is, after all the brainstorming and telling them what they wanted. And when they heard the word fertility, almost everyone in the group got really excited about it and believed that this would be an incredible program to help women. And so I agreed and I said, you're right. I'm an expert, right? I've been working with fertility for so long. I can do a fertility program. So I did that. I started marketing my message and my program, and I started talking about fertility again. The thing is, I still didn't love it. And after about 3 launch attempts and failing to get one fertility program off the ground, I realized that I just needed to stop doing fertility. And do you know why my launches failed over and over again? I mean, it could have been that it was bad messaging. It could have had something to do with my sales skills. But what I've learned is that if you're not into it, people know. Perhaps they don't know on the conscious level, but they know at the soul level. They know at the subconscious level. Their energy was reading my energy, and we were not vibrating at the same level. And that is why I believed I had several flopped launches. So if I had just listened to my own intuition, instead of what other people were telling me, instead of what my coach, who had the best of intentions, was encouraging me to do, I would probably not only have been happier on my path, but also attracting more of the right patients who couldn't wait to sign up for my program. Because that is how it happens, warriors. When we're in alignment with ourselves, when we are using and referring to our higher self to make decisions, life gets a lot easier. The offers become a lot easier. It's easier to talk about what we're offering because it feels good and we know that it's going to help a lot of people. Does that make sense? So I know I strayed a little bit from the message, but I hope that you get the gist. It's easy during times of confusion or lack of clarity to simply ask other people or your guru to simply just tell you what to do. And as a side note, in my interpretation, a good guru will ask the right questions and lead you to realizing your own clarities for yourself. A good teacher will offer you the lessons and the knowledge and will give you the freedom and the inspiration to trust yourself and use that knowledge toward owning your gifts, starting your business, increasing sales, and charging what you are worth. What I want to tell you, and you may or may not resonate with this, but it just feels very alive for me right now. So I'm guessing that if one person out there needs to hear this, they will hear this, and my job is done. So while it's really important to have mentors, teachers, guides, coaches in your life, it is so very important to understand that the purpose of the mentor or the guide is to teach and inspire, and then detach from any outcome. You may be wondering what prompted the creation of this episode. And quite honestly, I've been wrestling a little bit trying to figure out how to explain this to you. The best way to sum it up is that I've been noticing too often people getting caught up in their guru. And I'm calling it a guru, but I'm speaking about the teachers, the coaches, the guides, the mentors. I'm kind of wrapping it up into one title as the guru. And they go out and they run their businesses and their life according to what their gurus taught them. And then a launch flops. Or they aren't happy with the products they are putting out because they aren't aligned with it. Or they go through a period of darkness because they basically lost their own identity in trying to do all the things that their guru has taught them. And on a side note, I just want to mention that if it feels difficult right now to follow your own intuition or to be in alignment with your higher self, that is often a self-worth problem, right? So I invite you to keep listening to this podcast, really learn about your self-worth, or work with somebody that can help you with your self-worth so that when you are ready to launch that program, that product, or whatever you're working on, that gift that you are giving to the world, you will know exactly what that is and what it feels like. And it is going to feel good because you are going to be in alignment with it. So remember, warriors, we really only have one big job in this life. And that job is to be ourselves, to align, to be in integrity with ourselves. And then from there, it becomes much easier to make the plans, to run a business, to plan your day, etc., 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 to take care of your children, to help your family, whatever that is for you, right? But it really starts with the core essence of who we are, because it just becomes a lot easier to work from that place as opposed to working from that place of, I got to do all the things, and to cross things off the list just for the sake of crossing things off the list, but not necessarily having any feeling or meaning to it because you're not working from your higher self. And on a personal note, I can tell you that having coaches and mentors has been the best thing I have ever done, hands down. From the very first coach I worked with when I first started my business, to, the coach I work with in between, to my first business coach, to the many coaches that I've had since 2017. It is truly the best thing I've ever done. If it wasn't for them, and from learning from them, I seriously would not be where I am today. I would not be in front of the microphone. Okay? Like having a podcast would be this thing that, maybe I'll do in 20 years, but not, I basically pulled it together in a matter of a couple months once I decided to do it. And I have to really honor the people that have helped me get to this place. However, it is still my responsibility, and it is still your responsibility to decide where to use the knowledge that I've learned and that you've learned. So for my gurus, they may use it one way, but that's going to be their way because they are individuals, they are human beings. We all have our individual way. And what I'm learning is what works for me and what doesn't work for me. Right? So what works for them may or may not work for me. What works for your guru, for your teacher, may or may not work for you. So when I have been the most lost or have lacked the most clarity in my relationship with my gurus, that has been when I took everything my gurus said to heart without connecting to myself first to figure out what my higher self wanted to do with this information. And honestly, warriors, it doesn't stop with the guru, right? We are a culture that has been taught to idolize other human beings, sometimes in a healthy way, but way too often in an unhealthy way. Am I right? I mean, look at celebrityism. That's a prime example. And I have been totally guilty of this, right? So I'm not here to shame or point the finger. But I think that many people are, because it's become so normalized to look outside of ourselves for the answers, right? Instead of looking within ourselves. So before I conclude this episode, warriors, I want you to know that you are more powerful than you will ever know. But it just starts with believing that piece of information first, that you are more powerful than you will ever know. And once you really hone in on your self-worth, your self-love, and know that you are here to give to the world in this very unique way that only you can, you're going to take off. I know you will. And you have everything that you need within yourself to grow your business, to have better health, to be a better parent, to have better relationships, to have better sex, better orgasms, and have that great life, that money, that house, the dream life, and everything that you imagine, everything in this life that you deserve is all within you. And with that, my warriors, here are a few takeaways that will help you remain centered when it comes to working with your guru. Number 1, find a guru that you feel very aligned with. This person ideally should have similar values to you. And it is okay to ask your guru, what are your values? And it can be part of that interview before you actually hire your guru. What are your values? Number 2, I highly recommend having more than one guru at a time. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to hire more than one coach at a time, but it means that you should have maybe a coach, an advisor, a mentor, and a teacher, and you're not always paying all these people, right? But just to have different people to run things by, right? Because I think that's really important, to have different opinions, other thoughts, right, as you're going through this period of learning to go within and trust yourself. I think it's really important to have more than one person to help you with that. And finally, number 3, pay attention to your intuition all the time. If something feels off, go within and ask your higher self what will best serve you at this time. Pull out the journal and start writing. Make it a habit of always checking in with your higher self. And trust me, warriors, it will get easier and easier to come from that place. So I hope you found this episode helpful. I hope that my sleepy voice wasn't too distracting, that my tangents weren't too distracting. And I really hope, most importantly, that the message that I'm trying to convey is that you guys are all so powerful. You can do anything. And while it's important to have the gurus in our lives, the person that actually knows what's best for us, what program to run, what people to hang out with, how to spend our energy is yourself. So, as always, warriors, I want to thank you for listening to this episode all the way to the end. And until next time, please take care of yourself. Love you so much. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for listening to the Empowered Warrior podcast. It is an honor and a privilege to have you as a listener. If you've enjoyed listening to this podcast and would like to help others pave their pathway to freedom, end their disempowerment and suffering, and become an empowered warrior, please share this podcast with your friends and family. Also, it is my intention to help humanity grow and evolve to their highest potential. So if you really enjoy what you're hearing, please help me spread the word by leaving a review in iTunes. Thank you again, and I am so grateful to be able to serve you in this very exciting way.